Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. I think this will be the last Monday night that we do this year. I sort of like what's happening right now, and I think I'd like to do something starting in January next year on Monday nights, maybe every other Monday night. And my inclination right now is to make it really casual rather than having to be here right at 7:15 and meditate for half an hour. I'm thinking we might just have it sort of like an open house where you can drop in and stay as long as you want and then leave, and anybody can bring any questions they want, and we'll just work on or anything you want to work on. If you want to work on a script matter or a relationship matter or anything you want to work on in an open forum, or questions or whatever, you could just bring them and we can talk about them. So I'm thinking about doing that. I don't know for sure yet, and I would be delighted with any feedback from people as to what you would like to see and what you think what would be useful to you and what you'd like it to look like. So we can let that guide us. I don't know that we need to do it every week or whether we could do it like on the second and fourth Mondays or something like that, but I'd appreciate the feedback. We do have 3 questions tonight. And we might as well start with them. Dulcie's got this neat light, isn't it? I can actually see this without aiming that light to where it shines in your eyes, So. The first question is one that we all may encounter dealing with. It says, I'm in a 12-step program, CODA. In the steps, there's one where we ask God to remove our defects of character. There is other conversation as well about asking God to help with things. I'm not sure how to deal with this because in our work with you, we're being taught not to ask God for anything. How can I deal with this? I also am hesitant to express this to my sponsor because she does not do spiritual consciousness work. She's in AA. And I believe that anonymity is important here because she may not understand or be open. I lost my first sponsor because she wanted me to define my idea of God more, and I'm trying to keep that open too. It's a good question. And there's really more than one question there. A couple of things came to mind immediately, and this is, by the way, open discussion, open forum, so other people are welcome to jump in and comment. My first thought is that we need to be pretty clear about exactly what our sponsorship relationship is, what we want from it, and everyone may be totally different, but a sponsor, in my opinion, should at least be someone who has worked the steps and can show you how to work them. And a sponsor should be someone who has what you want, and I tell the people that I sponsor that, when somebody comes to them, they've said, well, you have something I want. And so my job, if you've told me you want what I have, is to tell you, show you how I got what I have, okay? And that's what my job is. And there's nothing beyond that. I don't know anything about that, but we tend to expand sponsorship roles. They become counselors, and they become mothers or fathers, and they become doctors and therapists, and are recommending that we take medications or stop taking medications, and on and on and on, and that's 6 different roles. So I think the most important thing is to have a clear understanding of what your relationship is with somebody at the time. As far as I'm concerned, a sponsorship relationship for the purpose of going through steps once is a perfectly good sponsor relationship, and it could end there. Or it could continue in some other form or in the same form again. I don't know. That's entirely between you and the sponsor. But the important thing is to know why it is that you have this sponsor. And another thing that came to me immediately is that this work is spiritual work. Any 12-step program is spiritual work. So you'll want a sponsor who is at least up with you spiritually, I would suggest. And the third thing is that when we're in this work, we still have to, and our understanding this work at deeper and deeper levels, we find ourselves more and more involved in double talk out there, because we don't need to tell people what it is we believe or what it is we think. We can just let people say what they say and just, not bother responding to it at all. But more and more we get involved in what Joel calls double talk. So that's another comment that sometimes, there's a lot of, AA is very sound and very solid fundamentally spiritually. And there are details of wording and such like that reflect the fact that it was written by some individuals who were, white male Christian Midwesterners who were 4 years or less sober. And in spite of the fact that the whole thing is very solid spiritually, that fact shows up some. There's statements like, we can easily see why we shouldn't pray for ourselves, but it's okay to pray for ourselves if others can be helped. And I can't easily see why that's true, for example. I'm back to our teaching about prayer, and that is not something we understand as prayer, but we don't need to attack the big book on that point. I think it's important to have a sponsor, though, it's important to have your relationship with your sponsor clear, and it's important to have a sponsor who's able to keep up with who's with you spiritually. So that's as much as I know about it. Is there anybody else that has a view or a question or a comment or a feedback?
Just my experience is I've had many, 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 many sponsors. One for each thing they had I liked. Mm-hmm. And what one had, the other one couldn't help me with. If they, like my main squeeze, I've been with 25 years, but she can't help me with work situations. She can't help me with food. She does not meditate. She's extremely connected, seems to channel through, but I would not go to her with mysticism, any kind of mystical issues or meditation issues. I keep it to what she knows and has experience, strength, and hope to share with me. And then I move to someone else who has that particular area for that particular time.
And if she started giving you instructions about food, you'd probably have to fire her.
That's right, because unless she had conquered it herself.
Right. That's the point. Is that my point is that in whatever area you're working with that person, it's because they have something you want in that area. Jay, do you have any comment on that?
Well, just that I have my sponsor, and then I have 3 different people that I consider spiritual directors. Mm-hmm. And I don't have to cross-reference my direction from any of those people through my sponsor or even make any of them line up.
And I've had one sponsor for 28 years, but the fact is that she's always really been a spiritual advisor. Mm-hmm. And that was our relationship from the gate, and she continues to have never been wrong. So far, so good. Yeah, she's a rock. Why would I go anywhere else? So I think that probably covers that.
Well,
yes,
I like that question. The part that relates to me is not about the sponsorship, but it is about the fact, too, that I spent a lot of time going to work in the mornings, and I would meditate in the mornings. God give me the strength to get through the day and all that. And now that I've done the work here, I am feeling a little lost about that and trying to think more, well, we're all God. All of us are God. But there are times that I feel, and I had told my sponsor this, a little in between. Mm-hmm. I don't feel really strong in what we've done in the last 8 weeks with the meditation.
Sure.
And I have such a strong base the other way of 11 and a half years of doing things one way. So that part of that question, I really related to that.
Sure.
I'm not sure. I feel like there's no God to talk to because we're all God. So I don't know. It was a good question.
Oh, it's a really good question, and emptying out is difficult. I mean, and nobody is saying that you need to do that, but the point is that Yeah, what each of us needs to do individually is look at what was said, especially in the first class, and find out if it's true for you. You know, there's a lot of implications about asking God for something. The primary one being that God either doesn't know you need it, in which case we drop the omnipotent, omniscient, or omnipresent, or that God's withholding it until he's asked properly for it, which also is a pretty strange concept of a God. So there are inconsistencies in the concepts of God and prayer that we have been comfortable with using for 11 years, and those are worth noticing if we're trying to grow spiritually. And that's the point. You know, the point is that my point is that I can't ever, and I haven't since I've been sober, I haven't ever been able to think of anything that I should tell God or ask God for. My only prayer has ever been thanks. You know, because it has never made any sense to me to tell God anything or ask God for anything. It just conflicts with all my concepts about one power and omnipotence and omniscience and omnipresence. So, you know, that's the place that infinite way students operate from, and people that are dropping into this way of thinking. And you just look at it and see whether it's true for you or not. The point of this class is not to change anybody, but it will. But the point is to encourage you to look clearly at what you're doing and see what's in your cup. See what's in your teacup that like we've said, needs to be emptied out before you can put fresh tea in there, you know. What often happens is that we have concepts of God that we're very comfortable with, and are functioning under the illusion that it's working for us. And the fact is that our life just happens to be going well because we're doing the steps of whatever it is we're doing, and it has nothing to do with God, the fact that our life is flowing smoothly. But we tend to attribute things like that to God just because everybody else in our group attributes it to God. And this is all very fine until a parent dies, or a kid dies, or some tragedy happens in our life, and then we find that we have no explanation and no prop and no support and no understanding, and it flips us entirely the other direction, and we have a lot of trouble with that. So that usually it takes a tragedy or something, or a personal tragedy or a physical problem or some absolutely real, pressing human problem to drive us into the spiritual work. Very few of us do it out of intellectual curiosity. Although, you know, greed is a perfectly good reason to do it. It's just as good a reason to do this work as pain. Yeah, what?
No, this is kind of a 3D remedial. When you said double talk, what were you referring to before? I didn't understand.
Oh, just the whole thing. I mean, you know, well, it's double talk. Everything I've said tonight is double talk, because everything I've said tonight is phrased in such a way that it's based on the assumption that we're real and separate from God and can pray to God.
You're going to contradict me?
No, I mean, I don't believe any of that, so I'm lying to you is what I mean. It's double talk. What I'm doing is I'm phrasing it in a way that's comfortable for people I'm talking to, while knowing inside myself what my truth is. If you call me and say, "Can you help me with the flu?" I say, "Sure, I'll be glad to help you." But if for a second I thought that you had flu and needed help, I would have been the wrong one to call. Do you see? What I do is know that there's no one to cure, nothing to cure, that there's only one power, there can't be flu and stuff like that. But my response to you is, "Sure, I'll be glad to help you," because you don't want to be told that you don't have flu, or that there's not a you to have it. That's not why you call. See, that's what I mean by double talk.
I may not be at the point where I can grasp it.
Mm-hmm.
So
no, what you are is miserable with the flu, and they're on the phone looking for help. You know, and you'd like some comfort, you know, warm fuzzy, and to get rid of the flu. Okay.
I just real quick. Mm-hmm. I'm very aware that I still allow my little kid to pray if it comforts her.
Ah. Fair
in
enough.
other words, my spiritual, it's like double talk. My spiritual adult knows the truth, But if my little kid is comforted by praying, I see that goes on.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah.
And the other thing is, Joel often talks about and essentially sanctions, if I am really asking my own higher self for more clarity, I mean, what would be wrong with praying, well, give me some clarity on this, or give me some help with this, or something, where you're really talking to your own higher self saying, hey, clear the glass, let me see what you're really saying is, let me see the truth. And you may phrase that lots of different ways, and what would be wrong with that,
Speak, Father,
Yeah, we talk about that. We talk, that's what father, what servant. These are our old words, but the fact is, I'm listening is just a statement, is a state of mind that word, that sentence may bring you to. I'm sure it did for Joel. He said that so many times, 10,000 times probably. And when he said that, he was probably immediately dropped into the silent place of expectant listening, which is the place to be if you want to hear the still small voice or the thunder. Where you want to be is silent, expectant listening. Uh-huh.
I was going to say, for me, I can reconcile, for instance, the language of the third step prayer. The seventh step prayer, from the point of view of, even inside the language that's there, it's a demonstration of a willingness to step into a certain consciousness.
Sure.
And you can take it on whatever level you like.
Right. And the third step prayer, the front half of it is wonderful. Relieve me of the bondage of self. I mean, that's what we're talking about here for sure. Relieve me of the bondage of self is could I wake up now, please, from where I'm sitting. So, yeah.
I was relating to what you mentioned about when I'm suddenly aware that what I've been doing is no longer my highest truth, and yet I don't yet know what the next thing is, the next truth is. Right. And for me, it's like I need to hear it over and over, so like re-listening to the tapes from the class, and or listening to the Joel or Robert tapes, often, like daily. And in a lot of the Joel books, he talks about meditation as being the highest form of prayer, or the highest form of prayer is silence. Mm-hmm. When you're just having this listening stance. So it's almost as like my experience of prayer just evolved, and so the practice then became reading some Joel or listening to a class, whatever, throughout the day as much as I could, and then just trying to be still. And instead of trying to use my mind to figure out what the next thing was, to let it reveal itself, and that practice has just kind of continued on, but I was relating to that.
There's a fundamental problem with emptying out your teacup before you put the fresh tea in, and that is that there's a period of time during which you have an empty teacup. That's just how it works, and that's true spiritually. That's what all this talk about the dark night of the soul is about. What did you have, Sean?
Well, it was a great segue, because when I teach the big book, we talk about the defect of character, and it's just semantics. But the way I teach is your character is your God consciousness, is your omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence. That has a defect of character, which is your human consciousness. So when you're asking God to remove your defect of character, it's really going to a higher level of consciousness. And your defect could be considered your kid, and your character could be considered your spiritual adult. So when I'm in that context, it fits perfectly.
Yeah, we can all find ways to work with it. Let's move on. Number 2 is much more fun. If I suddenly awakened and realized without a doubt that it was all a dream, I understand that everybody else in my dream is gone. They never were. Unfortunately, that includes the people in my Monday night spiritual consciousness class. Like, if I wake up, you guys are gone. So what about these illusory people in my dream? Once I've awakened, do they continue to exist outside of my awareness or my experience and have a real identity in their own dreams, or are they just gone? And there's more. The analogy of having a dream at night breaks down right at this point. I mean, this is as unreal as the dream at night is, but the process of waking up is a very different process in this. First of all, Lee can't wake up because Lee is the problem. Lee is the one who's asleep. You'll recall we said that all there is consciousness, and consciousness is expressed as individual impersonal consciousness. And that impersonal consciousness is the spiritual being which is having a human experience over a period of lifetimes, okay? And what waking up and what's happened is that personal consciousness, while having this human experience, has become identified with the human experience and thinks that's real. And that's all just in the bubble. We identify with this body-mind, and we identify with this role we're playing in the mind bubble, in the five senses bubble, and we think that's real. And that's the dream. Now, if we wake up, then that means that the personality is gone. The awakened person is the impersonal individual expression. So when we wake up, what we're waking up to is just being the awareness. And this is literally impossible to say, so we'll double talk. There is just the awareness. And the awareness is constant, and it's the awareness that you are experiencing right now. Right now you are aware of whatever it is you're aware of. You're seeing whatever you're aware of. But the confusion is that what you're aware of right now is the input from your five senses, or the sixth sense if you throw in your mind and thinking. So the confusion is that you're aware of this sensory input, and as a result of that you're identifying with this body-mind thing, which is the tool that has these senses. But that's not who we are. We're the awareness, okay? Now, being awake means always knowing that you're the awareness, and that this body and mind and this five sense apparatus is just a fiction. It's not real, it's not material, it's just, Robert would say, superimposed on the fabric of consciousness. So what happens when I wake up is the picture is still the picture, and I see all the people are there, and I see myself, and everybody sees me. And the difference is that I know it's a dream, and the people who are asking these questions don't know it's a dream at the moment. And the other thing I see is that this awareness that I am is the one awareness that there is. So it's also the awareness that you are. In other words, the other thing I see is that you too have always been awake, just like I have always been awake. It's just that I didn't know it because I got messed up and started identifying with the body-mind. Rashneesh used to say, you think it's so wonderful and bizarre that I'm up here standing before you and that I'm enlightened. And he says, and I think it is so wonderful and bizarre that you sit down there convincing yourselves that you're not. From the enlightened viewpoint, everybody's enlightened, and there never was anybody that isn't enlightened, because the one that thinks they aren't enlightened is the personal sense, which never existed. That's the illusion. The other thing is that we're all looking into the same bubble. We're all looking into the same dream. It's not that I have a dream, that this body is seeing a dream and that body is seeing a different dream, and that if I wake up, that this dream disappears. We're all looking into the same dream. We've all got a port into the same mind. There's one mind in which the reality of God's expression is in that mind, and there is also this human bubble perception of that expression. And that probably is confusing enough, so now let's work with that for a while.
Lee,
Yes.
one more time, will you explain what Joel means by impersonal expression of God?
Okay. And impersonal, individual, God expresses itself as impersonal, individual consciousness. God is consciousness, and it expresses itself as personal, individual, impersonal, individual consciousness. Now, what I can say for sure about that is that the awareness that I am is absolutely impersonal. The awareness that I am right now, this awareness, is the same awareness that I had when I was 6 years old, when the content of my consciousness was totally different, and when my body was totally different, when I didn't have a cell in common with what I have today, and I didn't have a thought in common with what I have today, and yet that Lee at 6 years old is the same one as this one. It was me. I am. It was he. It was the same sense. So the awareness that I am, the consciousness that I am, is impersonal. It's personalized only in the sense that I have the silly idea that I'm operating through this body, or that I appear to be operating through this body. It's also impersonal in the sense that it was that same consciousness that was looking out through whatever body I did in my previous life, which might have been, a Chinese female. Okay? But it was still exactly the same individual expression of consciousness. And I look at it as, as far as this bubble is concerned, each individual expression of consciousness appears to us like a particular point in space from which this body is aware, okay? And another body is aware from a different point in space, and another body is, so that there seems to be a point in space where this individual impersonal awareness is aware from. But then, of course, that's all being said from the viewpoint of the 5 senses. So it's not something that can be said. All I can do is talk about whatever it feels like to me. But it is real clear, it's perfectly clear to me that the awareness that I am is absolutely impersonal, and it's the same awareness that you are.
Is that my I amness?
Yes. If you're saying it and you don't have any concept of body or mind in it when you say it. And don't say it's my I amness. It's the I amness, which is expressed here, okay? And it's expressed there, and it's expressed there. So those are individual expressions of I amness. And they're impersonal, because it's the same I amness.
So impersonal is like the same as the oneness.
But
Separateness seems to go with...
At least it's impersonal in the sense of without personality. Without any of the human attributes, without any humanhood to it, with no ego. Robert, who was always in that situation, had no ego at all. No sense of personal self. If you talked about Robert, he knew you were talking about that body that had Parkinson's disease. But he was very clear that that was no more his body than mine was when I was sitting next to him. Neither that body sitting next to me or that body sitting next to him were him. And he knew that perfectly clearly. He was an impersonal consciousness with no association with any ego at all. But he was still seeing from that point, and he's still seeing, we continue to see other people and such like for as long as we're functioning in this human experience, as long as we're playing this game in the bubble. The core thing that helps me stay clear is remembering that there's one consciousness and there's one life and there's one mind and there's one body and there's one intelligence and there's one, whatever it is you want to say, okay? Expressed as all the things we see. These are our concepts of it, but ignoring that detail. You know, the life of the tree is the one life. The life of the dog is the one life. The life that I am. There's just one life, and the life is in trees, and it's in cats, and it's in dogs, and it's in people, and it's in the plant over there, and it's in rocks, and there's one life expressed infinitely. We can think of a pine tree, and a pine tree has a pine needle, okay? And there's really one pine needle, infinitely expressed. Look at all the pine needles, every one of which is just slightly different from every other pine needle in the millions of pine trees with millions of pine needles. They're infinitely expressed, and that's sort of the way God works. And God is infinitely expressed as human beings, as people, as whatever this is that's having a human experience. And it's in that sense that it's infinitely expressed, and it's in that sense that it's expressed at all, in all the infinitude of variety that it's doing for whatever reason it's doing it as. And it's all impersonal in the sense that there never was any ego in anything. It's all God, it's all what is, isn't. It's what is doing whatever it's doing, expressing itself as it's expressing itself for whatever reasons it's doing it, because that's its nature, no doubt, is the reason. And it's all done permanently, and it's all finished, and it's not going to do anything tomorrow that it's not doing today or yesterday, and it's ising is what's happening infinitely, with an amazing richness of changes, and we're just seeing these little tiny snapshots of it through time, with these stories about development and changing and growing and stuff. Does that help at all?
Are we allowed to ask a question?
Sure. That's what we're doing here.
I know that every question leads to another question.
That's right.
So there's material, mental, and consciousness. And I'm a silly guy. And then there's other people that are very spiritual that my friend had grown up. This guy, 5 years old, was just there. And now he's 40 and he's just still very clear. I sent an email, he responds, no legitimate complaints. His whole life has been like that.
Sure.
And then I grow spiritually because I obviously buy into the false belief. So I have to go through all this spiritual growth. Mm-hmm. And then on one of the Roberts tapes, they say the guy at car wash can just be struck and enlightened. Mm-hmm. And and then I start thinking, because I'm in the mental stage.
Why me, Lord?
Well, no, that's one thought. but another thought is, my spiritual guy is 23 years older than me. So I have all this time to hopefully be this big, peaceful, nice, guy. So none of that is spiritual, what I just said.
True. That's all human.
Right. So
it's all part of the Leelaa.
Someone shared yesterday some really good stuff in this class, like all this practitioner stuff. But I was there a year and a half or 2 years ago, where I was doing a lot of spiritual work, and then it falls apart. Mm-hmm. So it appears that I have to do all this work for no reason. I mean, all this effort, and it's effortless work.
That's the way it appears.
Yeah, I'm stuck in the effort.
It's, measuring where you're at spiritually against where anybody else is at spiritually has got to be the greatest waste of time in the world. The only thing you can possibly do with it is beat yourself up. Because in truth, you have no idea where you're at, and you have no idea where you're going, so there's no possibility of measuring your progress. And the other thing is, you're measuring your progress in this lifetime against somebody that you're looking next to in this lifetime, and you have no idea what work they did in previous lifetimes that you may not have done, or that you did in previous lifetimes that they may not have done. it's like seeing two people going past in the river in two boats, and they're neck and neck, and you think, and one pulls a foot ahead, and you think, wow, that guy's winning the race. And the thing you don't realize is that one of them got in a mile up the stream, and another one got in 100 miles up the stream, and you have no idea what's going to happen around the river bend. So the whole idea of measuring where we're at against anybody is just a waste of time. The only thing to do is to observe yourself and see the extent to which you react. And that's a fairly trustworthy yardstick of where you're at spiritually. Because if you're reacting, that means you believe those things are real. And the other thing is that every bit of work you do adds up, whether you can tell it or not. Balzac used to talk about going up the steps in the dark. And all of a sudden, you take a step, and there isn't another one. And you had no way of knowing you were at the last step until you were there, because you were going up the steps in the dark. I like that image. When you take the last step, bang, you're out in the light. But one step earlier, you had no way of knowing which step you were on. So that whole thing is just a way of entertaining yourself. Yeah.
If there's not another question, I guess.
There is one more question.
I'll wait because I didn't write one down.
Okay. That's the advantage of emailing the questions. Oh yeah, this is another fun one. You said that the body will do whatever it came here to do and that it will always take care of itself. An example you gave in one of the TNT workshops related to a mother taking care of her kids. That's what the body came here to do. Is it then that the body is acting instinctively or intuitively, not really needing any input or direction from my thinking mind? And can I mentally interfere with its role or accept erroneous concepts about it to the extent that it will be unable to do the right thing? The question is grounded in the assumption that there is a being separate from God that has a power separate from God, that has free will, that can make decisions and interfere with God's plan. In fact, that there is a person who may or may not be doing the right thing or who may be interfering with doing the right thing. And if we go back to the way bottom line, that all there is God expressing itself as impersonal individual existence for its purposes, then there's no other power. There's nothing that can prevent God from doing what God is, or I'd rather say what is, because God sounds like there's in-time volition. There is nothing that can prevent what is from being what it is, which is the truth. The question of free will versus determined. Robert says that a lot, that your body will do exactly what it came here to do, and he also says just unequivocally that everything we do is absolutely predetermined coming in, and the determination for that is that if there's no ego in anyone, then how could that not be? The question of whether or not, and this really is the question of free will, the question of whether or not there is free will is not the right question. The question that should be asked is, who has free will? Who could possibly have free will? Okay? That's the question to look at. Not what, and Joel, by the way, actually says very clearly on one of his tapes that there is no one that has free will. It's Lee who thinks he has free will. And Lee is the illusion, this personal sense, this ego. And Lee is the illusion. Lee is the dream.
And there's nothing that Lee can do to affect reality.
Right. Lee is an effect. Li is an effect of whatever is of the one cause. In fact, Li is not even an effect of the cause. Li is a concept of the effect of the one cause, which is eternally done and true. Okay?
Area of probability.
So, the problem is that there are so many levels of spiritual teaching, of talk. Everything. Joel is talking to. I've been listening to a lot of Joel over the past year, and it is so different to hear his message when he's teaching a closed class in London than when he's teaching an open class in Kansas. Because
He never even went to Kansas.
You don't think so? Kansas City?
Kansas class?
Absolutely. Just the one. He never went back.
Nobody heard him there.
I didn't have any red shoes.
Discovered there was no reason to be there. And it was very clear from the tape that there was no reason for his to be there. He was for whatever reason. But his London class was a very high class, and because he's been with those people, and it's the same people every year for 12 years, and they're getting it. So the problem is, though, that Joel's truth is truth. The truth that Joel knows was absolutely true. But the audience determines what he can teach, and therefore he's couching all this stuff in terms of a Father and a Son and a God giving it to us, and God, fulfilling our needs and the treasures in heaven and this and that, and all this endless dribble.
Double talk.
Not even. But it is to them because it made them happy, and because if he'd told the truth to these people back in the late 40s and early 50s, he would have had no students. And his mission here was teaching, obviously, teaching this stuff. He didn't want to, but he was told to. So all that stuff that he talks about, it's all in the double talk, and it's all talking like there's a God and an us. And even though we know that we're really spiritual beings, nonetheless, all the talk is as if we're independent from God, and that we need to get God we need to understand this better. Who needs to understand this better? And we need to let God express itself through us, and who needs to let God express itself through them? And who could possibly prevent God from expressing itself through them? All this stuff is the way he was attempting to talk about what is. And Robert talks about it entirely differently, but Robert has his own double talk and a lot of the time, because you can't talk about it straightforwardly. You can't say what is. All you can do is point at the moon and hope that somebody will see the moon. Hope somebody will glance up there. If you're mute, all you can do is point and hope they quit studying your hand. So that always goes on. That's just the fundamental problem. And you need to immerse yourself in a teacher deeply enough that you understand, you learn what his double talk is and what words he's using and how he's using them. And in the process of doing that, you also become aware silently of what his real understanding was, which he's unable to express, but which he really had as truth, And the way you get all that is by immersing yourself in the consciousness of your teacher. And then you do get that. And you discover that, Joel talks about Father and Son, and I talk about self, capital S, and myself with a capital S. And we're talking about the same thing, but he's using a vocabulary that his people could understand because they were Christian Scientists. And I'm using a vocabulary to not trigger all the buzzwords in people's mind, because I have no idea what father means to you. But, I'm real clear that Jesus didn't mean male parent, So that's the problem. And I
We
think
have no other way to communicate in the bubble other than through our conceptual form, but we're trying to communicate something that's outside the bubble, so it's necessarily.
Well, consciousness communicates. The point is that none of this talk is necessary, I got my understanding from sitting with Robert, not from asking him questions or listening to him or anything. I mean, I did go to the satsangs and listen to him, but when we were alone on weekends, we didn't talk, we just sat. And I just got who he was, So that's where it really comes. And
I got to admit, just watching you talk about consciousness and those kind of a real clip that you experience, what actually brings to my head.
Yeah.
The consciousness that we all abide in and how it's there.
Mm-hmm. And, you can't get more out of this class than I have. And the class is limited by the consciousness of the teacher. You can go somewhere else and get more than I have, but you're not going to get more from me than I have. But some people will hear what I'm saying in different areas, and other people won't have a clue. And my job is to express myself as clearly as I can and let it fall where it will and do what it does. And different people get different clicks in different areas. And yeah.
It's a little off the topic. That's okay.
Start with me.
This is a human question, but I want to know how, or if it's possible to out-picture something. Because I've heard often from people in this work, something's not happening, it's because I'm not out-picturing it. So I want to know how to out-picture something without becoming emotionally attached to it, so that I'm actually pushing that away. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the answer is kid work. Pure and simple. Yeah.
The only answer is
It is. That's why we do kid work here first. The first answer is always kid work. You can't do the reason kid work exists is that all of Barbara's lofty students who were having really high spiritual experiences were following up with tantrums when their best needle pushed the button, and that's what, including Barbara, I mean, tantrum probably a strong word, but she certainly was having meltdowns with her husband, and she'd been teaching the Infinite Way for 25 years.
My spiritual development kind of do that. My kids, I can see emotion attached.
Yeah, yeah. The answer is eliminate the emotion. Then you can see clearly. Then you can do this work at a higher level. What did you have, Brooks?
I get a little confused with how Robert's consciousness, or whatever Robert could be in a sick body, or even Joel, whose people's letter or phone call would strike up against his consciousness and be healed if they were open enough to it, but he would still need glasses. I have a hard time understanding that. I understand that there was no body, but at the same time, there's the consciousness that creates and the mind that reflects, and how it reflects the sick body if this consciousness does not know two powers.
Okay, there's a couple of different things there. Let's take Joel and the glasses, because he actually addresses that. The fact is that there are a lot of beliefs in human consciousness that are floating around that you're being radiated at subliminally. And Joel, his work really was to prove that none of them had any power, that no disharmony was real and had any power. And that's what his healing work was all about. And he went to the extent of healing mongoloid babies and stuff like that, and stopping typhoons and stuff, just to prove that this was true. And he said that he could probably eliminate his need for glasses if he just spent a month doing it. You know, but the belief in needing in 70-year-old people needing glasses is just so strong in consciousness that he would have had to sit down and really work on doing that. And he was not willing to spend the time, you know, going to retreat just to get rid of his glasses, because he was doing, you know, he had 150 phone calls a day, and if you're going to solve your glasses problem, you have to stop wearing your glasses. So I mean, you can't read during the period that you're working with your eyesight, because if you're putting on your glasses, you're saying, "Oh, I need them," you know. So you have to be blind for the month or however long it took him to do the work. And he was quite confident that he could do the work and not need glasses, but he just didn't feel like he could take a month off from saving the world.
And I'm not trying to go like this, but it seemed as if he mentioned, or I got the message somehow, that, you know, he didn't even want to know names or names of disease, that the power was irrelevant. So to me, it gave me the impression that he wouldn't need to necessarily work on vision or eyesight or that belief, because in general, it was an in general thing, that it wasn't, he didn't have to worry about a cancer or this or this or this or this.
If he had always been in the absolute highest consciousness that he was in, then he probably would have had much faster instantaneous healings, even on the mongoloids and the tuberculosis cases and like that. But he wasn't always there. It took him a long time to build that up, and he sort of built that up disease by disease. I mean, and it's just the way it worked for him. I don't know why. People certainly did send him letters and get the healing before he got the letter, and that shows the level of the consciousness they were bumping up against. But he has to be in a position where he knows that it's a lie, okay, that there is no cause. And if he's sitting there blind, it's really difficult for him to know that there's no blindness, okay? It's when it's with yourself, it's much harder. And his consciousness just wasn't immaculately that high all the time. He had to go there. It's like Jesus used to take 40 days off and go down in the desert and meditate. And Joel took time off, you know, to lift himself back up and keep himself back up. And he meditated many times every day, trying to keep his consciousness so high that people could write him a letter and get the healing before he got the letter. And, you know, it wasn't perfect. Now, with respect to Robert and Ramana Maharshi, who died of cancer, and Ramakrishna, who died of cancer, and Nisargadatta Maharaj, who died of cancer, all of whom were fully enlightened masters. And I don't know about this for sure, but what I got with Robert is it's real clear that all the rules are off. First of all, most mystics have no healing ability at all, because they don't understand the principles and they weren't given the gift. Okay, Joel's healing happened to him, and then he learned the principles behind it, and they are in fact teachable. But 99 out of 100 mystics that have existed did not have any ability to heal. There are very few healers, and they all presumably could learn it, but most mystics, you know, the healing package doesn't come with the mystical experience package necessarily. Okay? And in the case of truly enlightened people like Robert and Nisargadatta and people like and Ramana and Ramakrishna, they didn't care. You know, not only did they not get the healing package, but it was irrelevant, because their personal situation was irrelevant, because they knew that it never occurred to Robert that that was his body. That wasn't him. He was this eternal consciousness, and he always knew that, which is the most incredible thing. You know, that was the incredible thing about my experience, is that Robert always knew that he was the choiceless, effortless, pure awareness, that he used to call it.
And how did you know that he always knew that?
I felt it. I mean, it just got transmitted in consciousness. I just know that he always knew that.
That's how he was describing when he was, the first question, he was saying, I always get questions, Robert, what do you see? Do you see light? Do you see consciousness? Do you see spirit? He says, well, I saw those things I couldn't function. I look at you, I see what you see as well. I just always know who you really are.
But he he never, I was just in his presence so deeply for so long that I know that he always knew who he really was. And he never confused himself with that body, which is an amazing, incredible state of consciousness. You know, I mean, he's one of the really, really very high ones. You know, there are very, very, very few of those ever. And so it was irrelevant to him. And those other three that I mentioned were also totally enlightened young. And they had a very clear understanding of truth. I mean, they knew it, and not an understanding in the intellectual sense. I mean, they had realized truth, and there was no healing package that came with that, and there was no
Is there a part
reason for it.
of mind reflecting that I'm confused on? Because I would have assumed that if there was no belief in two powers, that the mind could help but produce a perfect picture.
You,
Yeah.
Robert would say, who's seeing an imperfect picture? See, he would say it's the Ayani that's seeing the imperfect picture. Robert was seeing a perfect picture. He was seeing all is well, everything's unfolding exactly as it should. And he was seeing that it was all in the Leelaa, and it was all a play, and it had nothing to do with anything, and it was perfect. And he had,
So when you talked about the picture being perfect, if we were completely in tune with the one power and no belief in two powers, on our level we would produce a picture that was perfect, consistent with what our idea of perfect was.
Yes,
So because he was
Sure.
even
Mhm.
so far above having any idea of perfect, it didn't matter, and it was never...
yeah, see, Robert did not come up through 20 years of infinite way study. Robert got struck enlightened one day during a math test.
Right.
Like it, when you say got struck and someone got the gift, who gave it to him and how'd they get it? You know, I in math class, way it runs struck, and then somebody else takes 20,000 years to get there,
Yeah.
and lifetimes.
To see that maybe it already had 20,000 behind it.
Yeah, because maybe he had already done his 20,000 lifetimes and was almost enlightened the previous time.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah, how do they, you know, when I mean get it, I mean wake up.
yeah.
And it's that far away from anybody, and what triggers it, who knows? You know, the fact is that nobody's asleep, so how could you not wake up? But the story is that it's this slow process, and it happens to very few people that they get struck enlightened, or suddenly become enlightened, or suddenly get it. And you may have had small experiences where you suddenly get something that you haven't had before. And what Robert suddenly got was the whole thing. And what that probably meant is that he had gotten everything but the last little detail in his previous incarnation. You know?
I think it was mentioned in class that it's not something to count on.
Yeah. Yes.
Well,
Yes.
like when Jesus was crucified, he probably wasn't out picturing, you know, some guy with an axe.
Now, Jesus was doing what he was doing to teach a lesson. He was
Right.
strictly
But that was just
teaching his students something. But yeah, it's all what's in the belief system of the entity that we're talking about, you know. And
If I got totally,
huh?
if I totally rid myself of belief in two powers, then my outpicturing would probably be,
how are you going to do that?
yeah, whatever.
What Joel demonstrated is that people that do this work and hear these truths and work with them and assimilate them and until they become, you know, part of me rather than intellectual knowledge, will, as an immediate product of that, bypass 90% of the human diseases and 90% of the human problems and 90% of this and 90% of that, and you know, have a relatively clean, free, unencumbered life. And yet, and we see that lots of times. You know, you look at the old infinite way teachers, you know, and then there's a bunch of them who are 90 and in perfect health and doing great, but they do periodically get struck down with something, like Doris Crawford had a knee problem, you know. I mean, and had her knee replaced because she wasn't able to, I mean, Doris Crawford, who's been healing people for 40 years, wasn't able to deal with her own knee. and finally went and got it replaced.
Or her own daughter when her daughter got cancer.
Or her own daughter, right. And Joel wasn't able to heal his wife when she had cancer. And I did hear Joel say that when you ask about these really high teachers and practitioners who suddenly have major problems, he says any error in their consciousness must outpicture sometime. So, and that's true. I mean, if there wasn't in Doris the acceptance of the possibility of a malfunctioning knee, there couldn't have been a malfunctioning knee in her experience, because obviously you can't experience anything you're not conscious of, right? I mean, it's really tautological. How can you experience anything that's not in your consciousness?
They asked him, this Sargadata, why he smokes cigarettes. And he says, I don't. My body.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Joel had one of his very close students named Daisy, was actually in a coma for 8 years, and she was one of the #1 teachers for a long, long time. She was literally in a coma for 8 years and then died.
And Herb Fitch went into a coma.
Right, and
And
nobody
spent
could
his last
explain
3 or 4 years, but
And who's to say that's wrong?
yeah. I'm out of here, he says. Forgot to turn his body off on his way out, you know.
Shut the light switch on.
Well, Robert one time forgot to run his body.
Oh, yeah.
You had made the reference to Joel in his eyesight, and that he didn't want to take the time off, which it would have taken a month to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
But I was thinking of the work as being the absence of effort. You know, the word work seems like an oxymoron sometimes when I, you know.
No.
The whole idea is to not know that there is no problem. There's no.
If he knew that there was no problem, then there would not have been a problem. So here's an area in which he is not yet completely clear that there is no problem. And so he needs to do whatever he needs to do to clear that imperfection out of his consciousness.
Which would be lesson.
Well, I don't know what the thought. Clearly he believed that there was something that could. Clearly there was something in him somewhere that believed that there was a power other than God that could interfere with clarity. I mean, it's real clear to me that God is absolutely clear. And so if I have messed up vision, then it's real clear that there's something in me that thinks there's a power other than God that can mess with vision. Okay?
And could it be that is there just, there's so much societal belief that, when you get to 40, your eyesight goes, those kinds of things.
Oh,
that is so much pounding on you.
Yeah, and it gets more and more the older you get. The more and more the older you get, the more they expect you to not be able to see.
Right. So you're not only working with your own acceptance of that belief, you're having to satisfy.
Yeah, you have to constantly not accept what's in human consciousness, okay, which was what his primary work was making sure he never accepted what was in human consciousness. And the fact is that what we pick up on out of human consciousness is the stuff that relates to us. Guys never get breast cancer. Okay? We don't associate with that particular false belief in human consciousness, but there's no more reason for women to get breast cancer than men, except the belief in human consciousness that singles out women. Similarly, very few women get prostate cancer. Okay? It's a man thing. So we are picking up the thing that's appropriate for our sex and culture and age and everything. These are the stuff that we can react to. And we have to, item by item, almost not react to these things.
And from that perspective, there's no difference between traditional medical response and holistic medical herbology response.
Not at all.
It's all the same.
Yep. All trying to fix a problem.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is fixing the problem on a human level, i.e. taking aspirin for a headache,
yes,
slide back, and the practitioner was fixing her knee on the human level because she couldn't do it or didn't take the time or whatever the case was.
But if let's say a student who is trying to empty out has a headache, is it a backslide to take the aspirin, or is it just where you're at and you're maybe tomorrow you won't have to picture the headache and you won't need it?
Well, both of those are true. I mean, the fact that you're taking an aspirin is a statement that you think aspirin has power to reduce a headache, isn't it? You're reaffirming your belief that there's power in aspirin.
Yes.
Which is contributing to the problem, isn't it? Because if there's power in aspirin to fix headaches, there's probably power in something else to cause.
Valium.
Okay.
So a serious student would endure longer in hopes of getting in touch with the truth that there is no headache.
A serious student might, but a serious student might find himself incapacitated by the headache and take an aspirin. You know.
But isn't it predetermined that the aspirin would be taken?
Of course, in that sense. But now you're busting the double talk. I mean, in that sense, there's nobody taking the aspirin.
Well, like, I've talked to Ann about this, you know, and she told me that you don't, that the whole point of, quote, being on a spiritual path doesn't mean, like, if you have cancer, it doesn't mean that you don't take your cancer drugs and you don't need to do that on a physical level because, you know, because you're judging and you're like, I shouldn't take my medicine because then I'm getting power to do it. She's like, that's why I always get confused. She's like, you still do what you need to do to take care of that, but you do the spiritual work with it.
It is essential that you operate from the level that you're at spiritually.
Right. I didn't take antidepressants, and what I went through, I would not recommend anybody to go through without antidepressants, because a lot of people commit suicide. I just trusted the
Now, the point is that you need to know where you're at spiritually and operate from there. And,
don't judge. Like, if I need to take an aspirin, it doesn't mean that I'm spiritually unfit, right? I mean, that's what I have.
yeah, and you might want to run that by somebody that you trusted if you wanted to know whether or not you needed to take an aspirin. But, you know.
Because she thinks she needs it, so much she needs it.
No?
If I think I have a headache, then I might take an aspirin because of the fact that I think I have a headache.
Mm-hmm. Or you might need a spiritual healing. Or you might need a bullet in the brain. I don't know. You know, I mean.
3 mornings. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Might need a bullet.
We just deal with the things that are out in front of you at the time, and we don't just get here. We work here and here, and what's in front of us, what's in front of that aspirin maybe way on down that road.
But don't overstep your consciousness. I mean, you know, start where you can afford to start. I mean, I would say certainly if you were a beginner at this, you might work on enduring the headache without an aspirin before you started enduring cancer without radiation. You know, I mean, because with the aspirin and the headache, you probably have several years to work on your consciousness, and you might not have several years to work on the cancer consciousness. You know, so I mean. Operate from where you're at, or go outside and get help. I mean, you know, the other thing is the hardest person in the world to heal is yourself, because the fact that you need a healing already means that you've lost half the battle at least.
It's like giving your kid small doses of not doing their resistance behavior to try to gain trust.
Yeah.
Well, I know people who are never sick because they don't believe that they're ever sick. Yeah. They aren't really tied to spiritual awareness or any of this kind of stuff. It's just like,
yeah, they are.
I'll conquer it. I just don't get to it. That kind of, you know.
Yeah, they are. They're just very clearly demonstrating that what you believe out pictures. Yeah.
Regardless of the source.
Mm-hmm. Demonstrating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you don't believe you. If you really don't believe you can get sick, you won't get sick. That's enough for tonight.